So I'm here with Pat, and we are going to review the test that we did the other day. So it's 48 hours later, and these pieces that we put in water for an hour have had some time to dry. So we're going to compare how they look post the soaking. Like when we looked at them in the short video that we did earlier, they had just come out, they were still wet, and you could see the really noticeable differences. Well, there's been some cracking and some disfiguration in the material as it dried. And then we've also got a piece here that we're soaking just half of it, and then we've done a couple other pieces here that have been soaking for 24 hours. So we're just gonna kind of go through, review what's happening, chat about the materials, and share some observations with you.
So right away, looking at the piece that has been in there for an hour, the melamine, you know, it has shrunk a little bit, but it's still a good, almost an eighth of an inch bigger than the non-soaked piece. So, you know, it has dried out a bit, but it's still swollen. And then what's interesting when you look at this piece closely, you know, a lot of the edges have really started to flake and delaminate around the edges. And then if you look up even more close than that, you can see where it has started to separate. The layers of the particle board here have started to separate. And even, I think, you know, yeah, big chunks of it are flaking off. You know, I can rip off big chunks just because there's layers here. The layers have started to come apart.
The deflection of it expanding and contracting with the water and the drying, it's just delaminated it.
Yeah. You know, and I'm sure if that was a piece that dried and then this piece got wet again and then dried again, you know, as say your dishwasher cycle came on and off, I think that's going to just magnify over time that delamination process. So what's interesting here is the plywood though, it was swollen on the edges
very slightly swollen around the edges, just where the water got a little bit in, but it's back to normal.
You can hardly tell the difference. You know, marginally might be like a 32nd of an inch difference here between these two pieces. And I think that's just on the edges. In the center here, I don't think it's swollen at all. There's no delamination happening here on any of those layers. You know, it's still completely sealed. So yeah, that's a win, I would say, for the plywood testing, definitely.
Pretty remarkable.
And then if we go through the water bath now.
Yeah, so we've had these in here since we basically put them in at 9 last night, and it's now what, you know, 10:30 in the morning, so just over 12 hours. And there's some pretty serious swelling going on. But what we've noticed is that when it gets dried out, that's where a lot of the issues happen. Kind of think of it like a freeze-thaw cycle where, you know, your garden hose freezes and expands and, you know, blows the garden hose apart, you know, and then it, you know, in the spring it thaws out and you've got a hole in your garden hose. Well, these kind of expand out, and then when they dry back out, it's still kind of in a bigger form than it was at the beginning, and then they start to separate too.
This is a crazy difference here. Like you can probably already see that on the camera from that distance, but that's a good 3/16 of an inch probably. More that this piece has swollen. And then again, now if we take the plywood out of the bath, it's definitely, you can see where it's discolored a bit around the perimeter, around the edges, but I can't even feel where it's swollen on the edges on this piece at all, actually. You know, compared to the new one,
very
still,
slight,
yeah, very slightly, 32nd maybe of an inch, might be a 16th, but you can very hardly see the difference. There's no delamination happening here, I don't think at all. This one, I'm guessing, you know, yeah, I can start breaking off big chunks of this with my fingers pretty easily, right? Just falling apart. This one, yeah, I can't get in that. You're not peeling off the layers there. This one, we're taking off big chunks of the corner just simply by our, you know, brushing it with our fingernail. And this is probably the most interesting piece. So this one has been in there. How long has that been in there?
So this has been about an hour. hour and a half. It's, you know, had the bottom half of it stuck in the water. The top half, it just fell over. So the top half got wet here a little bit. But you can see where the bottom is swelling up, and then there's, you can see a noticeable expansion up to here, and then it goes back to the normal size.
So what's interesting to me about this is, you know, maybe not unexpectedly, it's the melamine is acting like a wick, like a candle wick, you know, and it's drawing the moisture up into it. So, you know, if you had this just say next to a dishwasher and it's just this edge that's getting repeatedly wet, you know, it's not just that edge that's going to fail because it sucks the moisture in through the entire piece effectively, you know, just like a sponge. You know, I don't know if you can tell how large this is, and then it shrinks towards the bottom, but the whole thing is swelling up as it wicks up that moisture, you know, and that's only been an hour. So as time goes on, you know, if we let that sit overnight, I bet the whole thing would swell up evenly.
Yeah, so there you have it, you know, kind of our walkthrough of what happens when these different materials hit the water, and when the water hits them, and then the effect. We'll do some more tests, I would imagine, kind of showing a piece like this on end, and then I'm calling it the freeze thaw cycle, but the wet dry cycle, to see kind of how it expands and contracts. And
yeah, you're probably not going to soak your cabinets with water, but every time, you know, you brush the bottom of your cabinets with a wet mop, or, you know, by your dishwasher, by your stove, you know, you think about the humidity from a boiling pot of water coming up and you know, brushing against the underside of your cabinets, your wall cabinets as that steam rises, right? This is just literally a sponge. It's just soaking up all that humidity.
well, it's similar to you know, cycle testing that they do in the engineering space, right? Like, we're compressing time here, right? So this, you know, sitting in I wanted to say solid water, but, you know, just in a bath of water, simulates what might happen over a few months, right? But a few months is a pretty dramatic timeline for your $10,000 to $20,000 kitchen to turn into, you know, crumbs because it's expanded and contracted and falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if it's doing this after 12 hours in water. What is this going to look like after a year or two of multiple, you know, getting wet and drying out? I almost think,
Strong men in the house.
yeah, I can almost, there's a giant crack here forming in the middle. Might be able to completely rip that piece right apart down the middle.
So again, you know, ultimately, we want to educate. Our cabinets aren't for everyone, but there are options out there that will last longer than some of the other options, and we're proud to have one of those.
Yeah, this is why plywood matters, right? People say, well, does it really make a difference? Do I need plywood?
We think
you
so.
decide.
Yeah, you
right?
decide.
Right? What would you rather have?
All right. Stay tuned for more shenanigans testing the different materials.